Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. So I didn't expect to be making this video. It's a little late, and I wish I could have put myself together more. I'm not gonna make excuses. Excuse me. I'm Wind Waker I Rule. I'm the biggest Wind Waker fan on YouTube. I'm calling it, maybe that's true. And we have a new Wind Waker video to talk about. I usually don't do these kinds of videos and I don't really want to make a reaction style video, as in like I'm not trying to play the video and react to it. That's not what we're doing here. I want to respond to it. Classic YouTube response. I feel like people don't make these kinds of videos anymore. Maybe they do. It's just not in this style. I don't know. This feels like old school YouTube a little bit. But yeah, like I just wanted to kind of talk about this great video, how Nintendo screwed themselves by releasing one of the greatest games ever made. Oh man, just such a great video. It's over an hour of just talking about Wind Waker. Um, one of my favorite games of all time, maybe my favorite game ever made. And this video just really unpacks specifically the environment, the landscape in which the game was produced, some of the problems that Nintendo was dealing with the industry at large, and how Wind Waker reflects that. And I want to just talk about the fact that this video, like, it unpacks a lot of that stuff, is stuff that I've thought about with the development of the game as a fan. That's stuff that's clear to me, is that the Wind Waker story is a game about its creation, as so many stories are inadvertently about their own creation in a weird way. I don't know, start reading into that the next time you watch a movie or play a game and think, how is this, how is what this game is, how is that being informed by the circumstances of its creation? All things are. And Wind Waker is no different. And in several ways, it's kind of in your face about it. This is a story about moving on from Ocarina of Time. It's a sequel. And what do they do? It's a story about the world of Ocarina of Time is literally destroyed. They're moving on from it, literally. And you can revisit it a little bit, but you'll never really revisit it, right? And that's the story of the Wind Waker, is ultimately its climax. Spoilers alert for the game. It's about really flooding that world, saying Ocarina of Time is in the past. We made that game. Now we're moving forward. And Zelda can still be Zelda, and Wind Waker in so many ways is a sequel to Ocarina of Time. There's conventions that carry over. The basics of the controls are pretty much the same. So much of the design carries over, but there's things that are new. It's a new story. It's not trying to feel tied to this formula, even though it does use that formula. And like compared to more modern games like Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, Wind Waker feels very similar to Ocarina of Time in retrospect. But there's so much of it that stands out, and so much of it that it does that is unique on its own. And I just love that this video it gets into just like the relationship that it has with its predecessor, as well as the industry at large, and the fact like this is all well covered, right? The Space World 2000 demo where people thought Zelda was going in a more realistic direction. Wind Waker comes out and it's cartoony, and there's this question of who is this game made for? Now, my experience was with Wind Waker, of course. I was a kid when it came out. I loved the art style. It was more accessible for me compared to other art styles that might have been more serious. Wind Waker appealed to me as a kid. I saw myself in this hero of winds. This little kid that gets to go on an adventure, and maybe people see him as just being just a kid, and yet he has it in him that that if you can put your trust in him and empower him, give him a platform, he can surprise you. Just like if you allow him to step up, there's things he can take charge of and accomplish that adults, might not be able to accomplish. Like that's the story of Wind Waker to me, like as a kid. Like that's something that really jived with me. Just that empowerment. And there's so much about that, right? Like, and I've talked before about like what is Zelda about and stuff that Wind Waker does, and that being a hero is also like it's not just slaying the beast, slaying the dragon, confronting the sorcerer Ganon, right? It's about your relationship to all these NPCs in the game. Zelda lets you be a hero by being kind and listening to people. There's NPCs that if you can just hear them out and hear their side quest, you'll be rewarded for going out and listening to them and helping them. And sometimes it's literally just listening to them, but often it's just small things. It's like if you can just give them a little attention and and be there for them, and even just doing something small is super meaningful. Just being there for people, being a part of a community. I think Windfall Island and Wind Waker really communicates that super well, and that's why it's one of my favorite parts of the game. Favorite towns in the whole series, just because it really communicates that. And these are people that don't really know what your fight is with Ganon. They don't really see you as this adventurer that's out there and is going to slay evil, right? You know, maybe there's people that kind of poke fun of you, and there's NPCs in the game that know about your quest. But a lot of that happens, behind closed doors. But on Windfall, you're part of a community, and you get to do good by actually being there for the community itself. You know, they don't care about Ganon. Even though, like, obviously there's things about the quest that they do care about. And this video talks about how on Windfall Island there's, what's the guy's name? Not Mila's, Maggie's father, right? Who is so distraught about the Helmerant King, the giant bird, kidnapping his daughter. And so you get to go to the Forsaken Fortress and rescue her. And so you have an active part in helping her. But he never thanks you, of course, in the game. But I guess there's so many things that this video talks about that I love, just especially about the story and the meaning of the game. And like I said, like, this is stuff that some of this I've thought about growing up with the game, growing up with the series. But there's some stuff that's like, ooh, this just clicked for the first time. Like, I love the game. I love Wind Waker. It's one of my favorite games, and I've already loved how meaningful it is. And the fact that this game, which already means so much to me, I already know it has so much to say, and that yet there's more. That excites me. That really excites me. It's like I love this game. I know it has so much to express, and yet there's more. And that just, oh man, that gets me going. And so I wanted to just share this excitement and passion with y'all while I was thinking about all these things. I mean, one of the big revelations of this video that to me was a big revelation is just really what it gets into with this, I think, the final tragedy of Wind Waker. And just to really address that point, I want to pull up the transcript. I'm going to include a link to this video in the channel in the description of this video, of course. But I want to pull this up. I don't want to play the video just because, I'm not here to react to it. And I don't, I want you to watch the video for yourself. I recommend watching it before you watch this video. But if you're watching this video, maybe that'll give you a reason to watch that video. Either way, whatever you want. But this is a response. But I want to pull up that part of the video and just kind of read you a section from this about the final tragedy of the Wind Waker. This is, I guess, like whatever part of the video this is, one of the final parts of the video. So he talks about, I should just play you the video. You should just watch it. But essentially, I'll recap it. He talks about, so in the end of the game, you get to puppet Ganon, right? And if you played Wind Waker, you know that you walk in, you see Ganondorf standing over the sleeping Zelda, and he has this little speech. He talks about what she's dreaming, what she desires, the fact that she's dreaming about oceans. She desires oceans, right? That she is, here she is, trapped in this body that's not hers, that doesn't really feel like her. She's this pirate, right? She's been there, and she's been so active in the story. And I think this is intentional. I know people have critiqued Wind Waker for Tetra, being this, really, involved character who has all this agency, and she's involved in the story. She takes you to the Forsaken Fortress. She empowers you, right? And there she is, and she goes after Jaboon and helps give you bombs, and, it helps you in your mission. Thanks to her and some other friends, she sets fire to Ganon's fortress halfway through the game, and because she thinks that's what it takes to beat him. It doesn't ultimately beat him, but she's doing her part. And then you take this character, and she transforms into the Princess Zelda, her ancestor, and takes this form that is not hers and stays stuck in a room for the rest of the game. And so I get that that's a critique, but I think that is part of the story, is that she's been turned into someone who's not the real her. And so in this moment, when Ganon is standing over her and she's dreaming of oceans, you can tell, here she is. She's the Princess Zelda. She's the Princess Zelda, but she wants to be Tetra again. And Ganondorf recognizes that. And there's that relationship with Wind Waker is trying so hard not to be Ocarina of Time. And in so many ways, it is like another Ocarina of Time. And it's aware of that. It wants to be its own thing. And yet it is shackled to this formula. But there's a couple of differences, right? Because ultimately, Tetra finds... there's several things that happen. At the end of the game, Tetra helps you fight Ganondorf. And you couldn't have beaten him alone. You had to have Tetra at your side. As Zelda, wielding the Bow of Light, this classic Zelda item, Tetra, finds power in her ancestry, in this tradition, and it becomes very important in putting the past behind her, taking up that mantle for a moment. But of course, it doesn't last. She does become Tetra again. But I guess like that's part of the story, and that's why Puppet Ganon is a part of it too. Is that a part of that theme is puppetry, and just this idea that she is Zelda has been reduced to a puppet of herself. She has been her unique identity is not being encouraged. She's encouraged to play the part, to act as if she's her ancestor, even though she's not her ancestor. She's her, and yet she is acting as if she's an ancestor. And of course, the Hero of Winds is caught up in this as well. Literally he's wearing the green tunic because he's recognizing the Hero of Time. Essentially, it's essentially Halloween. He's playing pretend, wearing the costume of the Hero of Time. And so he ends up looking like the hero, and he is a hero, but he's not the Hero of Time. He's himself. And so just I love that just about the story, and just the fact that Puppet Ganon is representative of that loss of identity. And that's just something I never really thought about with Puppet Ganon, and just that disconnect there, and especially with its intro. It's like I don't know, like I've loved that intro cutscene to Puppet Ganon, but I never put it together. That's like there's a reason that you see that happen before that fight, and connecting it to the other themes of the games, right? And he gets into comparing. There's this discussion of Link's grandma, right? And the fact that Link's grandma does not want Link to leave. She doesn't wave to him. She's so distraught that her children are leaving, right? You have to heal her with a fairy, the item that you use when you die in the game, when you lose your health. A fairy is the only thing that can heal you. So for a fairy to be the only thing that can heal grandma, that's how distraught that she is that her health bar is depleting. But you know what I'm saying? It's like I say that like a joke, but that's really meaningful. He talks about that there, is that Link's grandma in this game is literally heartbroken. Like what I'm saying is she's heartbroken, and what does a fairy do? It heals your hearts, right? Like this is stuff that's like I know it's kind of like funny when you say it like that, like comparing the game design to the story like that, but like that's what it's about. So I don't know. I don't think I'm reading too far into it. I love this take, and I love this discussion, and that stuff that just that gets me thinking just about this game that I love so much. And oh man, and there's so much here that just you need to just watch the video for yourself. But just that discussion of parents, right? And like Link's grandma does not want him to leave. If she had her way, she would keep Link at home, and she doesn't. But just Puppet Ganon again is just that statement of like, just like if someone became what their ancestors want them to be, if Tetra wants to wear the the costume of Princess Zelda, they are puppets, and puppets is not just the idea of being obedient, but that idea of being on strings, not letting you go very far, literally restraining you, being like a puppet attached by strings. There's a really interesting metaphor there that I just hadn't put together. And I've thought a lot about Puppet Ganon, right? And just like my lore brain's been thinking, and that's always been an impactful cutscene for so many reasons. And thinking about the story of who Ganon is and his relationship with his power. And, there's so much to unpack there. And like, and this video doesn't necessarily get into that stuff. And I think about like his final monologue, with the "my kingdom lay within a vast desert," right? That whole stuff. And it's that's such a great monologue, one of the greatest monologues of gaming history. And just who his character is. And to me, Puppet Ganon has been the symbol of, in Ocarina of Time, he transformed into a beast, right? But that beast was killed, right? And while Ganondorf was sealed away, Ganondorf survived, Ganon did not. And just like my lore brain does separate Ganon versus Ganondorf. And if you haven't heard that conversation, my take as a Zelda fan, and this is something that like is not super loosely, or it's not like very certainly defined by lore, but I think it's supported by what is present in the games, is that like there is Ganon and there's Ganondorf. And obviously like there's different reincarnations of different characters, but usually Ganon or Ganondorf is the same version of Ganon or Ganondorf. But I guess like my take is like Ganondorf, how do I put this? Ganon is this immortal evil spirit, and Ganondorf is someone who can be a host for that spirit, right? So it's not Ganondorf transforming into another form that is more bestial. It's this person who is a host to this demon, and when Ganondorf transforms into Ganon, it is this spirit that he is a host to taking power. That's kind of my reading of the lore. To me, that's what makes sense. And so in Ocarina of Time, at the end of that game, Ganon is the Beast Ganon is impaled with a sword, but Ganondorf is sealed away and floats into the whole thing and curses Link's descendants and all that. But Ganon, the Beast Ganon, is killed. And so when Ganondorf returns in Wind Waker, it's the same Ganondorf from Ocarina of Time, but Ganon's dead. Like the Beast Ganon has been slain, so Ganondorf is not able to transform into his true, what people call his true form, right? Like Ganondorf is no longer a host to Ganon. So when Ganon appears as an idea in Wind Waker, all that's left is a puppet. So that was kind of my reading of it, like using my lore brain and like kind of making it all stretch and not, maybe not super make sense, but that was just kind of my reading of it. So to just think about Puppet Ganon as being analogous to the themes of the game, it's like, oh, that's good. And I haven't thought a lot about, and this is just because I don't really relate to the side of the narrative, but, that story about Grandma letting Link go, and like I'm not a parent. I don't have a kid. Like that's just not something I've related to. I've seen myself more in Link, the hero of winds, being someone that wants to spread their wings. And I feel like I'm still a young person. I'm a young adult, and I feel like I'm still sailing off into the ocean, and that's still my part of my journey, right? And so I think that's just in my reading of the game, I've leaned more into that side of the story, right? And just the joy you can find, because Link from the beginning of the game, I think there's this feeling that he wants to set sail, and obviously what sets that into motion is the kidnapping of his sister. Now he's given a quest, but I think he takes a lot of ownership of adventure, and I think there is a call to adventure that really moves his soul and stirs his heart. Did I reverse that idiom? Stirs the soul, but I don't know. It's just all of those ideas, and just like what this really talks about. Because of course Anuma was a new parent when Wind Waker was being developed. So this theme of just thinking about the fact that your child eventually will become an adult, and just that awareness that the moment they're born, that they're going to become an adult one day. And that doesn't mean that they're never going to see you again, obviously not, but it does mean that they're going to spread their own wings, right? They're going to leave the nest, so to speak. And that is something that, you can't hold on to them forever. They'll come back to you. And Wind Waker shows that, right? Link comes back to his grandma partway through the adventure. That's when he comes back to heal her, to give her that fairy. And that's really meaningful. And she is, restored by that and is able to help him in his journey a lot more. And y'all see that. Why is DK rapping again? I mean, this video just gets into a discussion about like Nintendo and its relationship with the audience that it's making the games for as well. And that discussion of like, should it make games for kids? Should it make games for adults? Is it trying to be more mature or not? And Wind Waker was one of those games that came out and kind of bridged that gap. And I think Ocarina of Time did as well. Like, I think Ocarina of Time is like in retrospect, I think people want to feel like, or maybe when it came out too. I mean, I remember like in the mid 2000s playing Ocarina of Time, and it felt like a more realistic, serious game. But like, looking back at it, and especially comparing it to the art style of other games, like it's still a very cartoonish game. Ocarina of Time is still very much a cartoon fantasy game, but it is more serious, and it's a more somber game. And Wind Waker is more visibly vibrant, and the music is more cartoonish, and and uplifting and strong and vibrant. And Ocarina of Time has those moments too. But it's interesting how their aesthetics, I think, are more similar than they are different in some ways. And Wind Waker, like there's the aesthetics of the textures as well. Like there's things that to me feel like a 3D version of the A Link to the Past sprites in some ways. Like there's some things that are different, but look at like the grass and the paths and just some of its style of just like the way it uses its models and textures in some ways feels like a 3D realization of classic 2D Zelda games. So it's interesting to like kind of discuss Wind Waker's visual style as this huge departure, because to me it totally feels like Zelda. And I even look at some of the character models from Wind Waker and compare it to Ocarina of Time, and there's a similar level of cartoonishness between some of them. But I mean, that's a different discussion. That's just a different discussion. I'm just kind of rambling. But this video, I really recommend y'all watch it. I'll make sure I put a link to it in the description. But just I love just talking more about this game that I love, and just this does so much just in, I mean, it's a thematic discussion, just discussing the themes of this game, because Wind Waker really does have something to say. It's not just a game. It's a work of art. It's a masterpiece, and it has so much to express. And it's a flawed masterpiece, right? You could say that. There's things that Wind Waker does where you can tell that, like, oh, if they had had a little more development time, it could have been more. You can see that. And I know that there's so many things that people have talked about in the comment section of my channel about things they wish were in the base game, and I feel that way too about some things. But it's one of my favorite games of all time for a reason. And I don't want to keep rambling. This video could go long. And I've rambled enough, perhaps, about it. But just as an ending note, just I think about what Wind Waker has to say, and the ending of the message is that Hyrule is washed away. And sometimes I think about the fact that there's something that really got me going when we got to see a glimpse of Hyrule below the surface. And yet the game showed us that glimpse and we had to walk away from it, right? We saw this river in the distance and these mountains in the distance. Look, when you were at Hyrule Castle, I don't know if there's a clip of it in this video I can pull up. All right, I'll use this backdrop just while I talk about this. But, I think about, how I was moved in the game, thinking about this world that we never got to see. I talk about this in so many of my videos. I'm working on this fan project where I'm 3D modeling Hyrule as it could have existed within the world of the Wind Waker. I'm literally going, ooh, I wanted to explore Hyrule in this game, and it never let me explore Hyrule. I want to bring that world to life. I want to go see those mountains and bring it to life. And it's a creative project, but it's also one that's deeply rooted in just this feeling of just wanting to. It showed us that there was this world, and it was a world that I know we've seen before. We saw it in Ocarina of Time, and we've explored it in games since. But I still wanted to just see it in that style, in that art style, that beautiful art style. I wanted to just see new things, and just what moved me in that moment where I never got to explore Wind Waker's version of Hyrule, and I always wanted to see its game's version of Hyrule. And here I am years later, trying to just do my best to 3D model something to scratch that itch, and it does, and it really scratches that itch. But I think about maybe there might have been purpose in the game saying, no, we're not we're not going to let you explore Hyrule. We're moving on from Hyrule. We're going to flood Hyrule. We're going to destroy that world, and it's okay. You'll move on. There'll be more things. Let's move on. Ocarina of Time, it happened. It was great. You can always replay that game, but let's move on. And so sometimes I think about, for me, for my fan project, I love Wind Waker, and now I'm trying to see more of its world. Am I like Ganondorf in that sense, just trying to return to a world that was never meant to be explored? One that we should move on from. And I think it's a complex thing, because like, what is the game saying and what is Nintendo saying? Because obviously in this video talks about that, that Nintendo continued to make Zelda games, and it went back to Hyrule. It made Twilight Princess, it made Skyward Sword, it made Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. And these are all games that, the developers were trying to say in Wind Waker, we should move on from Hyrule. Let's keep going forward. Let's not worry about what could have been. But Nintendo is saying ultimately in the long run with the Zelda series, no, it's okay to go back to Hyrule. It's okay that you want to explore more of that world. That's okay. In fact, there's more to do and there's more stories to tell. Let's go back to that land and give you another adventure. And so that's what Nintendo and Zelda have ended up saying in the long run. But I do think there's a lot of truth in the way Wind Waker presents the narrative. And just the fact that, things can't, you can't waste time wanting the past to remain just the way it is. I think about The Great Gatsby even, it's that line about like, you can't repeat the past, right? Or, however, Nick puts it. And just like, I think about the story of that book. And I don't want to be Gadsby chasing Daisy as a fan. I want to be able to move on. But and obviously, like, that's one thing I think about. Like, I'm making Wind Waker Unflooded as a fan project because I love Wind Waker, and I'm willing to put time into it because it's a game that I cherish. It's a masterpiece, and I'm passionate about it. But I do want to be aware of that, and I don't want to make it in spite of the game's messaging. I want to be aware of it. And so these are just all things that I do think about, and it's a project that I guess I was just like someone who feels introspective about the game, and the game has a message that is very meta and is about its placement within the series. And it's encouraging fans to say like, hey, you wanted Ocarina of Time and you got Ocarina of Time, but there can't be another game like it. But also Twilight Princess came out, and it was trying to repeat the Ocarina of Time formula. So there is messy messaging coming from the Zelda series. And so I think the creators ultimately kind of like went back on that stance a little bit, right? That said, I really do respect what Wind Waker was saying, and I don't think it's a bad lesson to learn, just to say, it's okay to let the past stay in the past. So I don't know. How do I take that as a fan doing a fan project? I guess just like maybe I'm repeating myself, but that's something that sometimes I am still conflicted with. So I guess I'm just being vulnerable in this video where I'm discussing the messaging of the Wind Waker, and just these are all things that I do think about. And I don't want to be like Ganondorf, right? I want to let myself live for the future. So I don't know. I guess just this to say, just like I guess my lesson that I take away, something that I sit on, is like, I do care about Wind Waker Unflooded. I do care about bringing its version of Hyrule to life. I'm really excited by that, and I know that there's just something in my soul that wants to see that version of that world brought to life, and I can't really explain it, but I know that I want to see it, and I know that so many of you feel the same way. Just that if you grew up with that game, that's just something you've always wanted to see and are so passionate about it, and I'm happy sharing that passion with you. But once I finish the project, I'm excited about what's coming next, and I don't let this project stop me from doing new things, I guess. That's at least the way that I've applied the lesson from the Wind Waker, is that that's one project, and I'm still working on it and plugging away on it, but there's so many other things that I'm excited to do. And if you want to support some of those projects, links in the description to some of my other projects. Go to my main channel. I'm a short filmmaker. I make short films. I'm also a short filmmaker. Excuse me, that's a height joke. But I make indie films, and if you want to see the other kinds of stuff I make, go to my main channel, watch some of my short films. Go to my Spotify. I'm a composer. I make music. I do orchestral style music. I compose digitally. And if you like the music of the Legend of Zelda series, you might like the kind of music I do. So go to my Spotify, type in JoeKendrick. That's Joe Kendrick. Look up Joe Kendrick on Spotify. So I'll go ahead and plug my own stuff. So I guess just like, I've really enjoyed doing this fan project, but I'm not going to let it stop me from making new things. And I'm really excited to keep making new things and share them with you. And if you're curious about that, check out all those things. Links in the description. If you want to support me as a creator, become a member on Patreon. I'm just plugging my stuff now. Become a member on Patreon, gives you exclusive access to behind the scenes like bonus features. I'll send you scripts as I write them before I ever make a film. So just stay up to date on the kind of projects I'm working on, and you get early access to music that I compose as well. So it's that's a great way to support me. I'm gonna stop plugging my stuff, but all that is true, and I thank you to everyone who has supported me. And but anyway, I'm just rambling at this point. I love talking about Wind Waker, and I love that this video came out. And if you want to talk about Wind Waker more, go watch that video and leave a comment on on that video. I'm not here to talk about my own channel anymore. So without further ado, I'll let y'all go.